Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to view Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 2, Episodes 1 through 3. So, this is a three-parter called Mutiny, and we have within these three episodes the debut of Lord Zed, who come to find out on the show was to be such a menacing character that they had to go on and marry him off to Rita in this story to just, I guess, make him seem less menacing. And the goofy thing of it is when you would go on through any other Power Ranger season, like when you had like Lightspeed Rescue and like demons and stuff, like there's a lot more like creepier characters. There's a lot more kind of spooky or darkened stories. But anyways, I guess for the time period, like I guess it would make sense to state that Lord Zed was, of course, a character that would probably go on and be very menacing to a lot of people. And I also like the fact we end up having Piranha Head because he is a cool looking monster, and we come to find out that the Piranha Head is to kind of take control of the Zords within these episodes. And so it's like, okay, alright, so like we're bringing in a monster that the Rangers have to kind of be more creative to try to beat this thing, and it feels like they're all relying on Billy with another device yet again in this story. And we have, of course, Tommy. If bizarrely in this picture he is the White Ranger, technically the actual image should be of the Green Ranger, because Tommy is still the Green Ranger here, and he is starting to kind of lose his powers. And we, of course, even have at one point in these three episodes, we have Zordon, who's to kind of try and recharge Tommy. And so we have at certain points where Tommy's just kind of sitting on the sidelines, just kind of watching via the viewing globe, just like, all right, well, like, there's nothing I can do. But it's really interesting how Kimberly is to go on and consistently ask about, like, what about Tommy? Like, where is Tommy's Zord? Where is Tommy's this? Where is Tommy's that? Like, what are you guys going to do about Tommy? Because, of course, we have Kimberly and Tommy, who are obviously together, but still. So, eventually I'm going to go on and at some point cover, like, There's No Business Like Snow Business, where eventually we'll have that be the Power Ranger Zeo episodes, where Tommy ends up getting that Dear John letter. I was almost going to do that today, but then I was like, let's do this instead. So, with that said, I would go on and state that these Mighty Morphin Power Rangers episodes are okay. Really, again, like, these are very, like, slowed out. You could almost have probably realized that, like, what normally would go into, like, one episode, they try to stretch out to three. And so, like, they kind of put these new putties in place. The Z Putty Patrol, they go on to have a monster that it seems Rangers can't really fight all that easily. So anyways, so I think it's about that time to just go on into Double 5 time territory, because it's about that time, of course, to go on and go into spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil these episodes. These, of course, were easily on YouTube. I watched all of them there. One thing that I have to state is, in all honesty, I did state that these episodes were okay, but, like, Zed was to come off just so great in these episodes. So, even though I was to possibly, like, kind of just feel like this is kind of middle of the road, Zed bringing him in here was a very interesting approach, was a very interesting idea. So, with that said, let's go into spoilers. So, we have our Power Rangers who are at the Children's Hospital Motor Marathon headquarters. So, this kind of rally for charity. So, we all of a sudden start to see certain Rangers, and they're all on their four wheelers going on to do this whole race like thing. So, we have Mr. Kaplan, who it's been a while since I've gone on and seen this character while I was to do any certain Mighty Morphin Power Rangers episodes. But Mr. Kaplan is actually to be the principal of Angel Grove High. So we have Mr. Kaplan that is to kind of thank all of the teens for getting this whole marathon together to raise money for charity. So we go on to kind of have, of course, Bulk and Skull, who are kind of claiming that they're going to go on and they're going to leave the Rangers in the dust. And it's like, I don't think that's going to quite happen that way, but okay, sure. So we go on and have Rita, who, of course, is like, well, okay, like, let's kind of set up for another day. Like, let's kind of figure out how we can go on and come up with the monster. And then they all of a sudden realize it's like, well, wait a minute, like I think this day is kind of different than any normal day. We also had Scorpina, who is on this episode. It was like, okay, cool. Like, I've rarely gone on and seen Scorpina through a number of these episodes, so it's great to have actually seen her here. So, we all of a sudden have Rita, who is to kind of see this fog within space, and we all of a sudden have Zed, who is to show himself and state that Rita has failed far too many times. Now it is time for Lord Zed to take over. Come to find out, we'll realize somewhere within these episodes, Zordon goes on to explain that Rita was to go on and work for Lord Zed, and for the countless numbers of times that she had gone on to fail, Lord Zed is to now kind of take her place. And so we have, because of the entrance of course, Lord Zed here, we all of a sudden have the Rangers who are kind of sensing something weird in the air. And we have them kind of stopping their four-wheelers to just be like, well, like, do you feel that? Do you sense that there's something obviously wrong here? As we had like Goldar and Scorpina, who were kind of saying this, stating the same thing, until they then saw Lord Zed arrive. So we have Jason, who's telling the group, it's like, well, hey guys, hold on to your communicators because we might need them soon. So we have Zed, who is to bring his new moon palace to the moon, and we then show Zed's throne, which honestly, as far as like ways to present a character, still, like, the way that they have his throne set up, and also him kind of dealing with snakes, that has got to be like the coolest throne, and the like a really cool intro. And I think if anybody was to go on and want like a piece of memorabilia from a Power Rangers thing, it would probably obviously be the Zed throne. It would probably be very uncomfortable to probably sit in, but still, like, it's like an iconic piece of Power Rangers memorabilia, if that's the right word. So we have Goldar that is trying to remind Zed of who he is and his loyal servant, of course. So Zed is like, oh, alright, well, like, it seems since you're looking my boots already, like, we have Zed that goes on to give Goldar his wings back. And he's like, oh, alright, great, you gave that back to me, alright. So we all of a sudden have Rita, who's kind of like cowering in the background. She's like, ooh, gee golly, So we have her kind of cowering in fear. And so we now go to Alpha 5, and Zordon. And we, of course, have them, like, have the sense that there could be dire circumstances, and it's possible that Zordon may need the Power Rangers to be called right away. So we go on to have, of course, Lord Zed, who is to realize, like, oh my god, like, Zordon is still around? Like, he's still kicking it? Like, I didn't have any mind of it. And so we have Goldar, who's like, hey, Lord Zed, how about we put out some putties? And we, of course, have Lord Zed, who's like, no, like, you aren't gonna just send, like, your putties out. Like, I'm gonna go on and, like, bring out my own version of putties. And these, of course, are the Z Putty Patrollers. So we all of a sudden have Bulk and Skull, who are looking at their four-wheelers, and there seems to be something wrong with them. There's a dent, or there's to be some kind of oil leaking out of it. So, and they also start to notice that there's a storm brewing. So we go back to Rita, who is finally to beg at Lord Zed's feet. And Lord Zed is just like, well, okay, like, you know what I'm going to do with you? I'm just going to shove you back in your space dumpster and send you on your way. Send you packing. Like, you failed too many times. So, we have Rita that goes on to be shrunk down, put back in the space dumpster, and is to kind of go off and kind of be singing about how many bottles are on the wall. So we go on to have Bulk and Skull, who end up noticing that all of the four-wheelers are to, of course, be, like, missing the Rangers, because the Rangers are to have gone on to eventually morph and face off these Z Putty Patrollers. So we have both Bulk and Skull that are looking at the Power Rangers, and they're like, oh, we love you, this is great. So we all of a sudden have Tommy notice while he's morphed that he is to have his power starting to weaken, and it's not so much so that he unmorphs, but still. So we have Zed that comes up with the Piranha's Head monster. So, just in case for anybody that I was to go on and state that incorrectly. So, we have him come in, and so we have the Rangers that are starting to call for their Zords to face off against this threat, but we find out that the Zords are all frozen. Like the Mastodon's frozen, and we start to see like other Zords getting frozen. So we go on, and I think that's like the first end of this first episode. I'm like, man, like didn't really seem like they accomplished much, but uh, we have the Rangers go on and figure out how to take down the Z Putties by kind of punching them in the Z. So, and even at some points, it seems like certain characters would have to go on and learn that fact. Like, we would have the Power Rangers when they become like young kids, they end up having to remember how they can go on and take down the Z Putties. Excuse me. So we go into the following episode, and so we have the Tyrannosaurus Zord that is to end up getting controlled by Piranha's Head, and we have Jason that, of course, is realizing that they're going to need Tommy's help. So Tommy had gone back to the command center to try and get his powers recharged. And so he goes on and goes back out there to then call for the Dragon Zord. And we have Lord Zed who's like, ha 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 ha, like he's just gonna send that other Zord out? Well, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna have Piranha's Head just take control of the Dragon Zord also. So we have Piranha's Head that is to take control of the Dragon Zord after the Dragon Zord comes out and starts fighting against Tyrannosaurus. And so we then realize that the Rangers have no Zords left. And we start to see the Dragon Zord using its tail to kind of smack the Rangers, and they're kind of like, okay, like, get down, like, hey, watch out, like, this thing is coming at us. So, with the Rangers not knowing what exactly they can do here, we have Jason who's telling the Rangers, is like, well, hey, like, maybe we should go back to the command center to see if Zordon possibly has an answer. So, we go back to the command center, and a lot of the Rangers are kind of like, man, we're history. And Trini's like, well, like, I can't believe that this is how it's all going to end. So, we have Alpha 5 and we have Zordon who's like, well, hey, wait a minute. Like, we have a contingency plan. And so they're like, okay, what's the contingency plan? So, we have Zordon that is to show the Rangers the Thunder Zords. So this, of course, is kind of the changing of the Zords, and you know what? Like, I would still go on and state that I had gone on and gotten when I was a kid the Thunder Megazord, and gotta say it did kind of look cool. Like, it was this kind of like samurai looking Zord or whatever, but I do very much like the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Megazord compared to the Thunder Megazord. It's like the Zords for the Thunder Megazord were really goofy, but of course, like, I was lucky enough to like have parents that would go on and kind of get me all these Power Ranger stuff, and so those times were like really great. And eventually I would just go on and kind of reuse a lot of just toys for just a number of scenarios. So I just have like a number of like possibilities and whatever stories and whatever I can kind of concoct uh, for whatever Ranger episode I was kind of playing out in my head. So we have, of course, the showcasing, and this is in the exact same order of the show. I'm just kind of rattling these off. So we have the Mastodon Lion Thunderzord. We have the Pterodactyl Firebird Thunderzord. I almost said Thunderbird. So then we have the Triceratops Unicorn Thunderzord. Then we also have the Saber-toothed Tiger Griffin Thunderzord, which I'm kind of wondering why they had to go on and state like both saber-toothed tiger but also griffin. Was it just kind of like, well, hey, it's still we're trying as much as possible to just keep the same suits and not have to like state that now like the Yellow Ranger is now the griffin or and Billy's the unicorn and whatever. No, we're just gonna go on and give these rangers uh these other Zords. But we also have the Tyrannosaurus Red Dragon Thunder Zord. And so we have, of course, Kimberly that looks at all these Zords and she's like, well, like I'm counting 5 here, there's 6 Rangers. So Kimberly is to go on and ask, like, well, hey, like, where's Tommy's Zord? And they said it's like, well, like it seems that his powers aren't strong enough, so more than likely he may not get a Zord at this time. So it's like, okay, all right. So we have the Rangers that are still trying to figure out how to go on and beat this monster. So we have Billy who's asking like Alpha what Alpha's doing, and Alpha is kind of thumbing through this data and trying to figure things out. And so Billy is kind of like, well, hey, let me go on and help you. So while Billy's looking at this data, he then realizes that he can possibly make a device that can release the Zords from Zed. So we have Zed that is kind of planning and concocting that the Piranha's head is going to go on and take over Angel Grove, and that he's like even at one point he like states is like to Golar, it's like you're going to witness greatness at some point in these episodes. I'm like, okay, whatever, Lord said. You're just going to end up with egg on your face like all the other villains do in every one of these episodes. So we have Billy and Trini that need to leave the command center to go to Billy's lab. And so we have Billy who's talking to Trini about like, well, hey, do you have those wire strips? And Trini's like, well, yeah. And like, you know what they say, 2 heads are better than 1. It's like, funny. So we go on to have Bulk and Skull, who are on their 4-wheelers, and I think this is the point where Piranha's head is to appear to them, and we have Skull who's like, oh my god, this is a big fish, this big huge fish, and so Bulk is like, oh my god, yeah, you're right. So we have Billy and Trini who are hopefully close to finishing this up, but we also have to continue to milk this out. And so we have the command center that's like, well, hey, like, we can't wait anymore. Like, come on, let's go. So we have Bulk and Skull that are making their way through this marathon course, and they're very confused. And we have them kind of split up at some point because either one of them think that they can go on and figure out where they're going, which neither one of them have any clue. So we have again where we go back to the command center, and Zordon and Alpha are still, of course, calling Billy and Trini. I'm like, well, hey, where are you with this device? Like, we need it. And we have Jason and the rest of the Rangers are like, well, hey, we can't wait anymore. Like, we have to go on and figure out some strategy to just kind of just delay the Piranha said going on and attacking the rally or attacking people. So we have Jason that goes on and states that they're going to go on and morph, which they technically already are, so they're just going to go back into action. So we have Zed that goes on and like, okay, all right, well, like, I'm going to go on and I'm going to, like, release the putties and so on and so forth. So and release the Zords, and I'm gonna concoct this whole plan. So we have Piranha's Head that is to start talking to the Rangers, and we're thinking like, oh, okay, this is where they're finally gonna go on and fight the monster. Well, that all seems to just be a trap. Instead, we have the putties that come in to start fighting the uh, Power Rangers. So we have Zed, who all of a sudden is to like sense that there's possibly intruders, and we again have Bulk and Skull, who are very confused about where the heck they are going. So even to the point of we have Piranha's Head, who is to kind of take control of both Bulk and Skull, and they end up going goofily reverse wherever they are to go. So we feels like I went on and everything that I was going to state here I already technically said. So we go on to have Zordon want to just activate the Zords on standby because they know that they're going to get used. And so we have the Zords at certain points that are again trying to wreak havoc on either the Rally or the Rangers. So we have all of a sudden where all the Zords just stop. And like all the Rangers are kind of relieved. They're like, oh my god, whew, like we can kind of get a breather. But we also have Jason, who, before the Zords were going to stop, Jason was calling to Zordon saying, it's like, well, I don't know how much longer we can last without that device. So, and there's only so many times that Zordon and Alpha can call for Billy. So, we finally have Billy and Trini that come up with the device, and so they bring it to this place. So Zed was to go on and tell Goldar about him witnessing greatness and so on and so forth. So again, Bulk and Skull are still going backwards. So we have Lord Zed that is going on and talking about the waves of how he's going to attack the Rangers. So we have the Rangers go up against Piranha Head, and we have the Dragon Zord that goes on to attack uh, the people in the marathon, the four wheelers. So while also Bulk and Skull are just kind of going the way that they're going again, kind of unusual. So we have the Power Rangers who come up with a plan to get the Power Blaster. And so the Rangers are possibly going to use this Power Blaster, it seems, on the Zords, but then all of a sudden Jason is like, well, hey, we're going to go on and do this fake out, and instead we're going to have the Power Blaster kind of strike this Piranha's head. And I'm like, you're kind of going on and telling the monster, like, what is going on, but he falls for it anyways. So the Rangers blast Piranha's head, and that doesn't go on to completely wipe this monster out. So we had Billy that was trying to use this device, and this device is not working. And come to find out, all Billy needed to do to get this device to work was to put the battery the right way. So we have Zed, of course, who's getting very upset. So we have Zed getting to the point of him wanting to go on and say, like, well, like, hey, if they're going to go on and get their Zords back, well, I'm just going to put their Zords right back to where they came, to where it gets them in even more difficulty to be able to use these other Zords. So we go and have Zordon, who is talking to Alpha. It's like, well, hey, like, how about we just go on and try to use the other Zords and, like, use all the stuff that we have from those other Zords to help just kind of put things into these new ones, and then we can kind of send these new ones out anyways. So we get the other Zords to come out, and we end up going into the Thunder Megazord, and so we have Piranha Head who is attacking the Megazord, and he's using these chains, which I was like, man, like, I kind of like a monster with chains. Like, it kind of really just changes things compared to all the other times where you would have kind of like these tentacles or whatever. Like, it's just really interesting to just kind of see this kind of approach of ways for a monster to attack at a distance, because a lot of times it's just kind of like swipe with whatever thing that it has. So Tommy, of course, is watching on at the command center and is just like, wow, like, all right, like, I'm just kind of like forced to, like, without my powers, just kind of watch how the Rangers win this battle. Excuse me. So we have the Megazord that goes on and cuts slices, like per usual, through every case scenario. And Zed is like, well, hey, I lost this one time, but it'll never happen again. So we have Fencer sitting. It's like, well, like, he wouldn't have lost if he would have used one of my monsters. I'm like, I'm sure you would have kind of backpedaled that if you did have your monster and it did lose. So we had Alpha 5 who was talking to Tommy and saying, well, hey, like, we're gonna figure out some way to get your, like, powers fully charged. Like, believe me, Tommy. So we, of course, at the command center have all the Rangers who are talking about Tommy and his powers, and hoping that maybe at some point he can go on and get his own Zord. So we have Tommy who's like, well, hey, like, what about Rita? Like, what's kind of going on with her? So they end up going into the viewing globe and they realize that Rita is in this space dumpster. So she, of course, is going on and singing this song, and the Rangers are like, how funny is that? But so we have Zordon, we have Alpha, who are to make the Rangers realize that Bulk and Skull are still stuck going backwards. So this magic spell won't break until Billy is to use his device to help out Bulk and Skull. So we have the guys go back out with this device and use it. So we all of a sudden have Kimberly and Tommy who go to Bulk and Skull. So Bulk and Skull is to have this whole story about the Power Rangers, and so like Tommy and Kim is like, oh wow, what a great story. Like we were really just here to want to kind of check if Bulk and Skull's really okay. So we have the Rangers that realize what they're really here is to get back to the marathon. So we have the Rangers that go on to the finish line. We of course have Mr. Kaplan, who is calling to say like, "Hey guys, like uh, they're getting back to it. Like they're gonna go on and win this whole thing. They're gonna be the leaders of all this." I'm like, for how many other characters would have gone on and have won this race already. Instead, we kind of leave it to the Rangers to win this race, bizarrely. So, that, of course, is to be the way that this episode was to end, with this race finishing. I apologize for yawning, but also I just kind of had a very long day. So, with that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.